Good morning, everyone. It is Thursday, August the 13th, 2020. It is currently 9:28 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from Victory Baptist Church for a very important live broadcast. Now, I know that this live broadcast is going to be very controversial. I know this live broadcast is going to make a lot of people angry, but I need you to listen to me carefully. I need you to listen to everything I'm going to say. And let me say this right from the very beginning. I am not being dogmatic in this episode. I'm raising some questions. I'm raising some concerns. I'm raising some issues. And I think everyone needs to be honest about these issues, need to be honest about these questions, and we need to work together to try to find out what is the actual truth. What is the truth? Where does the evidence lead us? And then once we have the truth, once we have the evidence, once we have all the information, then everyone can draw their own conclusions. And I think even when all the evidence comes in, when we have all the facts, we have all the information, we have all the truth. When we have all of that, I think there'll still be some differences of opinions, but I think that you have to at least admit that this could be problematic and that it really calls into question the claims that are being made. Okay, so I need you to listen carefully, and I'm going to walk through this step by step. I'm going to try to raise these questions, and then we will see what the fallout will be. I know I'm going to get some seriously angry emails. I'm going to probably get some threats, but that's okay. You have to be willing to speak up. If you're going to have a theology podcast and you're not going to speak up about issues that are of great importance theologically, issues that don't impact the church, then there's no point in having a theology podcast. I know what I have learned. What you have to do if you want a successful theological podcast, you got to find your little theological lane and then stay in that lane, never question anything, don't rock the boat. You can raise questions and raise concerns about people not in your lane, but in other words, you got to find you're the little theological clique, and then you got to say what that clique wants, because as soon as you start making them mad, you lose your listeners. I don't care about the clique. I don't care about the lane. I care about pursuing truth, with or without offense to friend or foe. That's what I'm gonna try to do. So here we go. This is gonna be a bumpy ride. You may want to buckle in. Because you may be one of the ones who get very upset and offended at me, and I don't want that to happen. But here we go. All right, I'm just going to speak, and the consequences are going to be what they may be. All right, here we go. We all know that right now we're in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we know right now there's lots of arguing and fighting amongst Christians, right? There's all of this argument and debate. Should we follow the rules? We shouldn't follow the rules. The one rule we should follow is to not forsake the assembly. No, we need to love our neighbor. No, we need to obey the government. Everyone has an opinion. Everyone thinks they're right. Everyone quotes their scripture to support their position. And it's a lot of arguing and a lot of fighting. But within Christianity, there has emerged kind of a narrative that basically says, look, if you close down the church, you're living in fear and you're not living by faith. So your faith gets called into question. If you decide to, we're not going to have in-person services, we're going to close down, we're going to live stream, then your faith gets called into question. You don't believe, you don't trust God, you have a weak faith. All right, that's one narrative. Another narrative that has emerged, and these narratives really all fit together because you'll kind of get the idea. The other narrative emerges is that, look, the government is overstepping its boundaries. They're taking away our constitutional rights. If you don't take a stand for that, you're caving in and you're going to allow the church to be controlled by the government. And we know the church is not to be controlled by the government. The church belongs to Christ. The church does not belong to the government. Stand up to the government. Resist these rules. Resist these regulations. Don't bow before the government. Don't bow before Caesar. Don't cave in. The church belongs to Christ. It doesn't belong to the government. And if you surrender, then you are surrendering to the government and you're showing your loyalty to the government and you're not showing loyalty to Christ. Now you can see how these narratives fit together. Basically, if you decide not to have in-person services and to move to live streaming, if you decide to try to follow the rules and regulations offered by the government, somehow your faithfulness to Scripture, your faithfulness to Christ gets called into question. You're not faithful. You don't have enough faith. You're caving in. All right. And I've seen that narrative played out over and over. Now, to be fair, on the other side, the narrative is if you don't do these things, you don't care about people and you're going to kill people and you don't love people. So both sides have their narrative. Both, again, speak their narrative as if it's dogmatic fact. Very hard to find a biblical balance in all of this, which makes it very frustrating. But let me say this. If you're out there and you're yelling and screaming at everyone that Christ is the head of the church and not the government has nothing to do with the church. The government needs to stay out of the church. But then at the very same time, you hold your hand out and take money from that government that you says has nothing to do with the church, and you take that money as a church from the government. Doesn't that call into question everything you're saying? Doesn't that call into question your sincerity? Doesn't that kind of make your entire argument invalid? Maybe. Here's the situation. Grace Community Church, John MacArthur. At first, Grace Community Church came out with a statement saying, hey, during a pandemic, we need to demonstrate love. We're gonna move to live streaming. We're not gonna have in-person services. And they talked about submitting to the government and how to act in a pandemic. And they seemed to go along with what most churches were going along with. But somewhere something changed. And then they decided, nope, we're not going to go along with this. We're going to open the doors. We're going to let everyone come in. We're not going to force people to wear masks. We're not going to do social distancing. And they released a statement. You know the statement. It's very, very famous. You can read the statement. It's been all over the internet. You can read it for yourself. I have it at the theologycentral.net webpage, theologycentral.net. Go to the blog section, theologycentral.net. And I posted this on July the 24th, 2020. It is called Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church. Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church. All right. This was a statement put out by the elders of Grace Community Church in California. The article actually reads, Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church by John MacArthur. MacArthur's name on it. I don't know if he wrote it. If he wrote it and the elders went along with it, I don't know exactly how it was constructed. But this comes from Grace Community Church. MacArthur's name is on it. Christ, not Caesar, is head of the church. And I have stated from the very beginning, I agree with that statement. Christ, not the government, is the head of the church. And I have stated over and over, what should a church do in the middle of a pandemic? A church where Christ is the head of. Christ is the head of a church. That church finds itself in a pandemic where people are getting sick and people are dying and the virus is spreading. What should a church that Christ is the head of, how should they respond? That has been my position since day one. I'm not worrying about what the government, I'm worrying about how I should handle a pandemic in a church where Christ is the head of, all right? That's been my position from day one, but they're making that same argument. Hey, Christ is the head of the church, not the government. The government doesn't tell us what to do. The government shouldn't be involved here. It's Christ. Let me just read a little bit of the statement. You should read the whole thing because everyone argues that I'm not actually reading the statement. I've read the statement. I've made the statement available. Everyone should read it. This was posted on Friday, July the 24th, 2020. A biblical case for the church's duty to remain open. Christ is Lord of all. He is the one true head of the church. He is also King of Kings, sovereign over every earthly authority. Grace Community Church has always stood immovably on those biblical principles. As his people, we are subject to his will and commands as revealed in Scripture. Therefore, we cannot and will not acquiesce to a government-imposed moratorium on our weekly congregational worship or other regular corporate gatherings. Compliance would be disobedience to our Lord's clear commands. All right. So they go on and he's going to make this argument. Hey, the government, the government is over here. The church is here. The government shouldn't be telling the church what to do. Basically, the government should stay out of the church, shouldn't be offering rules and telling it what to do. I'm paraphrasing, but you get the basic idea, right? It sounds good. Sounds like a bold statement. We're going to take a stand against the government because this is Christ's church. It's not Caesar's. It's not the government's. This is Christ's church. We are going to take a stand. Sounds good. Sounds bold. MacArthur has been praised for it. Everyone was like, yeah, take that stand. Take that stand. Well, today, I was sent some information. Now, I cannot verify this as of right now. I have done some research, and I'm still trying to figure it out. I've tried to ask some questions. So far, I'm not receiving any answers. So I'm going to ask you to participate in this research project. Let's see what we can find. But from what I can discover, Grace Community Church, Christ, not Caesar, is the head of the church. It seems that they possibly have received more than $1 million in Paycheck Protection Program funds. Now, there's a lot of ministries who've received more than $1 million in Paycheck Protection Program funds. A lot of ministries. In fact, I have a list of ministries right here in front of me. I'm holding in my hand. This comes from Ministry Watch. Ministry Watch keeps a kind of a list of what ministries are doing and finances and a lot of things about this. And they have a list that has more than 400 ministries. More than 400 ministries who have received more than $1 million in Paycheck Protection Program funds. Now, I want to make sure we understand this. We're going to run around and tell everyone, Christ is the head of the church. Christ, not Caesar, not the government. Oh, wait. You've got money for us? Well, we're going to apply, and we want some of that federal money. We want some of that government money. In fact, we want more than $1 million. Now, we're not going to follow your rules. We don't want to follow your rules. We don't want you to tell us what to do, but we want your money. Now, wait a minute. Is Christ the head of the church, or is Christ just another business? Or is the church just another business? Is Christ the head of the church, or is the church simply another business? And if it's another business, taking government bailout money, then should you not be then regulated as a business and not viewed as a church? Are you a church or are you a business? Which is it? Is Christ the head of it, or is Caesar the head of it, especially when you need some money? Now, this raises some important questions. Now, I've got the list of ministries. All right, I could go through here. I've got Alabama Baptist Children's Home and Family Ministries. They received more than $1 million. That's in Alabama. Cottage Hill Baptist Church, Alabama. I've got Oak Mountain Presbyterian Church in Alabama. New Life Church of Arkansas. Arkansas Baptist State Convention received more than $1 million. Cross Church in Springdale, Arkansas, more than $1 million. Fellowship Bible Church of Little Rock, more than $1 million. I could just go through these. Church after church, ministry after ministry, Lancaster Baptist Church in California, Calvary Church in Santa Cruz, California, San Diego Rock Church, California. So I was just going through here. Okay, I'm in the C's, the E's, the F. Oh, wait. Grace Community Church, Sun Valley, California. Grace Community Church, Sun Valley, California. And I'm like, wait a minute, that can't be the church. That cannot be. And then, so I go to this, and then, oh, wait, here's MacArthur's church, and guess where it's located? Let's see here. It is, I'm going to pull this up. Oh, it's Sun Valley, California, Grace Community Church. So wait a minute. That cannot be the same church. Grace Community Church, and it seems to be at least from my initial research, Grace Community Church received somewhere between $1 and $2 million in Paycheck Protection Program funds. I did another research. This is what it appears. Sun Valley, their religious organization, Grace Community Church, they received between $1 and $2 million. Supposedly, they retained 264 jobs. They were approved for this on June the 17th, 2020. The lender is MUFG Union Bank National Association. Companies and nonprofit organizations that receive PPP loans, that's Paycheck Protection Program loans, may have the loans forgiven if they meet certain criteria, including not laying off employees during an 8-week period. So if they don't lay off any of those 264 jobs or employees, then guess what? They get to keep between $1 and $2 million of a government fund, federal loan, federal money. They won't have to pay it back. Now, are you telling me then, is Christ the head of the church or is Caesar? Who's really the head of the church? Hey, Christ is the head of the church, and we don't want the government telling us what to do, and the government needs to stay in their lane, and they should not exercise authority where they don't have authority. But then you're going to reach out and say, but we'll be more than happy to take $2 million. Now, you've got to at least you have to pause and go, okay, wait a minute. So here's what we have to do. First, we need to verify that they received between $1 and $2 million of the PPP fund. We need to verify that. If that is true, and let me state that again, if I cannot verify it as of right now, I went to the actual government site. That seems to be Grace Community Church. Maybe there's another church with the same name in that area. Seems to be the right church. In Sun Valley, California, Grace Community Church, they received between $1 and $2 million. I don't have the exact number, but everything says between $1 and $2 million. This is a coronavirus bailout. I've got 2 lists that list them. I cannot get confirmation as of yet. If they received it, this is the question I have for you. If they received it, does that not make it hypocritical than to say Christ is the head of the church and not Caesar? While taking money? I mean, I don't want the government's money. I don't want to be taking the government's money. What did they say? If you take the money, you get the control, right? If you take the money, then you get their rules. If you take the money, but here he took the money, but now he's like, I'm not going to listen to the rules. Because the church can't tell us what to do. Well, then why did you take their money? It doesn't make any sense. It's like, give me your money, but then you don't tell me what to do. Well, if you took the money, why wouldn't you have to follow the rules, the regulations? You can't have a gathering of this size. People have to wear masks. You have to have some form of social distancing. The church can't have it both ways. The church can't sit there and claim, hey, Christ is the head of this church, not Caesar. Caesar can't tell us what to do. And then literally, you're taking that money. Now, are you going to make that transparent? Are you going to make it clear to everyone that we took government money of over $1 million? Over $1 million. I can't even comprehend that much money. The church that I'm currently sitting in will never have $1 million in the entire amount of money that ever came in the history of this church. Okay, that's crazy. I don't even know what I would do with $1 million. And I would fix the outside of the building, probably pave the parking lot. Instead of gravel, we'd actually have a paved parking lot. Replace the front door. That'd be good because the front door is a mess. Yeah, we could probably really do some. I could probably buy some better equipment than this little laptop and this microphone for podcasting. I could probably do a lot with over $1 million. It's just crazy. So I'm sitting there just shaking my head. I'm trying to process this. At first, I thought this has to be a hoax. There's just no way. I still can't verify. So I'm going to reach out to anyone and everyone I can. I think this story has to be told. If you're going to be the one going public saying Christ, not Caesar, Christ is the head of the church, not Caesar, you've got to let everyone know that you're taking Caesar's money. In fact, you took over $1 million of it. And that calls into question the validity of your claim. Who's really the head of the church? I think that's a fair question. It's a fair question. I don't want the government's control. I don't want the government's money. I want the government to stay out of the church. And so my decision about what to do for our church, I'm trying not to base it on what the government's telling me to do. Yes, I'm going to listen to their rules. I'm going to listen to their recommendations because also I have a biblical mandate to be submissive to the government. But my main concern is, as a church, if Christ is the head of it, he values life. He doesn't, life is sacred. People are created in the image of God. I have got to make decisions trying to figure out safety. I don't want anyone to become infected and die. Was it in Georgia? A 7-year-old went to a church and he ended up with coronavirus, COVID-19, and he died. So a 7-year-old goes to church and dies because of COVID-19 that he ended up getting at church. Now, I can't comprehend that, and I can't live that way. I don't want that to occur. And you say, well, they could catch other diseases. I understand that. But in this particular case, we're literally in the middle of a pandemic with all the warnings saying, hey, be careful with what you're doing. Well, then I should take that into consideration. So here's how I'm going to end this. I cannot say dogmatically that Grace Community Church received over $1 million and the paycheck. Let me make sure I give you the right name of the fund because I don't want to be accused of it. The Paycheck Protection Program Funds, PPP, Paycheck Protection Program Funds. So it appears that Grace Community Church possibly received over $1 million. We don't have the exact amount, but somewhere over $1 million, between $1 million and $2 million. It looks like possibly saved over 200 jobs. They took the money, and at the same time, they released a statement saying Christ is the church, not Caesar. And in that statement, I don't think they ever acknowledged them receiving that money. Maybe I missed it. So right now, I'm throwing this out there. If it's true, I stress if, what do you think? Is that consistent with their statement? Is that a little hypocritical? Is that not consistent? How can you brag and be so bold that, hey, Christ is the head of this church, not the government? Well, you're literally, hey, everyone turn your head. Look over there. Okay, we're going to come over here. We're going to get $1 million, $2 million from the government. But hey, Christ is the head of this church, not the government, not Caesar. We're not going to listen to Caesar. We're not going to bow to Caesar. Caesar has no control here. But just make sure you know Caesar's money is helping us out. You draw your own conclusion. Now, you can help me research this. If you can verify this, and please, if you say you can verify it, I need sources, I need links, I need how you came to the information. If we can verify this, then I'll come back. If I can find out that it's not true, I'll turn this microphone on and go, no, that's a different Grace Community Church in Sun Valley, California. It's not MacArthur's church. They stayed consistent. They said Christ is the head of the church, not Caesar. They didn't take any government money. They were consistent. So whether we agree or disagree, they're trying to take a biblical stance, and they're trying to maintain that Christ is the head of the church, and this is what they have done. All right, I've already given my statement on what they have done, but this adds all. I think this information is absolutely critical to the story. And if you're going to Grace Community Church and they're telling you, hey, come on, come to church and you don't need to wear a mask, or well, they make masks available, but they're not making them mandatory. And you go there, possibly being at risk of catching COVID, and you get COVID, you pass it on to someone else and someone dies. Just make sure you realize you did this under the pretense that, hey, this church is about Christ being in charge, not Caesar. And if they were taking that money, would that change your opinion and thoughts and maybe what you're doing? Are you really trying to prove that Christ is the head of the church when your church is turning around taking government funds? I mean, that's something you have to ask yourself. And again, right now, this is an if. We're trying to find out. So here's what you can do. Do your research. If you have any access to actual information that can give us the truth, email it to me at newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. Now, some of you are going to accuse me of all kinds of things. You're going to threaten me. I don't know why people act that way. Look, I'm just raising the question. This is a valid question. It's a valid question. You release a statement saying Christ is the head of the church and not Caesar, and you're taking government funds. That's a valid question. And look, all of these other churches on the list, the same thing. Now, all these other churches on the list, I don't know if they're out there making some bold statement about, MacArthur's on the news. He was on CNN. He's been all over the news making this stand. Well, maybe in those interviews, it needs to be stated, hey, Dr. MacArthur, thank you for joining us. Please give us your position on why your church is not following the mandates, not following the rules, why you have gatherings with far more people than is been recommended and have been told to you by the government. Okay, well, we're not doing any of this because Christ is the head of the church, not Caesar, not the government, and we're going to follow Christ. Okay, thank you, Dr. MacArthur. Is it also true that your church received over $1 million in payment protection funds? Paycheck payment protection funds from the federal government? Is that not true? That question needs to be asked. And if he says yes, it's true, then at that point, then it's up to the listener to see if they can reconcile the two. I just think the information needs to be out there. All right. I'm going to let the chips fall where they may. I think this is probably not going to be pretty, but that's what we have right now. I'm going to continue to look into this. I'm going to try to find the truth. And I listen, I'm not trying to make any accusations. I'm not offering any condemnation. I'm simply saying if this is true, it raises questions. And I think we can all agree with that. newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. Thank you for listening. Be safe. Look out for one another. And as Christians, let's do our very best to try to figure out the biblical way to act and to handle this very difficult situation in this very difficult time. God bless.